Good evening. I'm Dr. Miaken Zeigler, and I first want to thank you for being here today. Time is brief, and I know all of you who are showing up to invest in your time with engaging with me today on this topic have likely had to arrange part of your schedule to be here. My promise to you is I have invested a lot in being a good chiropractor, a good person, and what I need to deliver today. The question for you is, what is your intention with being here? You're only going to be getting out of this what you're willing to receive. And we've got around 28 minutes of content, and it is your choice to gain, right? We're all growing and moving in a spectrum, right? And my goal for you is to grow in a positive way, to gain information, to show up, open your heart, open your mind so that you can be your best. So let's begin. And I think tonight's topic of conversation is quite important. Tech neck. Tech is short for technology neck. Sometimes you hear people referring to it as text neck, is a major problem. And quite frankly, I don't necessarily like that we've got a named condition for tech neck, because that normalizes things. And when things are normalized, it seems like it's not as big of a deal. But what we're finding is that tech neck is a much bigger deal than some people maybe are giving it credit for. So now the human head is actually weighs, and this is the adult head, weighs about the same as a bowling ball. That's 12 to 15 pounds, right? And if we just talk about the weight or density of things before we go into talking about the head and the bowling ball, if you were to hold a 5-gallon jug of water versus a 5-gallon jug of paint, what is the difference there, right? Do they feel equal in weight? And no, they don't, right? Because that 5-pound gallon or 5-pound jug of paint feels heavier because it is a different density. And so understand, when we're talking about weights, sometimes things feel differently because the density is different. And when you're talking about a head that weighs about the same as a bowling ball, that's 12 to 15 pounds. When we're looking at tech neck, we're going to really be considering, where that head is in space and how it can cause increased stress to a neck and a spine, and what does that do to the body, right? A lot of you, when we sat down and did your report of findings, I said, let's say you hold a bowling ball here, right? Doesn't seem so bad, but as you hold it out in space, feels a lot different, right? So as we change that leverage point, we call it's a class of statics and dynamics in engineering school. As we change that leverage point, it changes the strain and stress on the rest of the body. And so let's just go with that for a second here, because this is research published in the Journal of Technology International. And this looks at the degree of change in terms of, where your neck is angled to. It tells us the amount of weight that is placed on your neck and your spine. So let's just talk about this. Let's go back to that statics and dynamics conversation, or that engineering conversation. If you've got a bridge, okay, and you need a suspension at the top to help stabilize that bridge. Let's talk about the Golden Gate Bridge, right? We have that bridge, and then at the top it has those suspension lines, right? Well, let's say this suspension line needs to hold 10 million tons, okay? So you've got this 10 million tons. You need this opposite and reactive equal amount of weight that will hold 10 million tons. Well, guess what? The steeple in the middle, it needs to be anchoring in, counteracting the weight from both sides, but also anchoring in that 20 million tons. So let's think about this in terms of your head. As your head shifts forward, okay, you've got a counteracting weight that needs to take place within the musculature and structure to counteract that weight. And not only that, but it's pushing down into the spine. So it's causing significant stress to your structure. And I don't know about you, but if any of us are carrying any type of technology, whether it's an iPad, a phone, whether we're at a workstation working on our laptop, if we have any type of angling of that cervical spine, okay, that causes significant amount of stress that counteracts, so that a lot of work that our musculoskeletal system has to do, but a lot of pressure and pounds of weight being pushed down into that spine. And we do this all day, right? Can you imagine carrying around 60 pounds of sugar, day-to-day activities, right? No. I mean, and we do it without thought. And actually, one of your pieces of homework for this week, I'm going to challenge you to just evaluate people's posture, just walking around, and see where you see this type of structure showing up, right? Whether they're on their phone or not, we see this type of posture, and we add this type of weight to it, causes significant stress. Our body's just that amazing that we don't necessarily feel or experience that stress until long term down the road. So keep in mind this type of structure and posture and how it impacts your spine and your neck. Okay. Now, I just want to know, as we're, considering the posture that we take on when we're reading, what is the difference now compared to, we'll say, 100 years ago? Now, I pulled these pictures up, and certainly when you look at how a lot of people are holding the newspaper or their reading materials, you see that similar presentation, right? Where their head is down and they are heavily involved in what they are reading. What's the difference between then and now? I think you'll find that when you look at the type of work and activities that our culture and society engaged in 100 years ago was very different than what is required of us today. And not only that, but you see mostly adults in these pictures. I think technology has engaged us in a way where it has become so involved in growing up and so much a part of our childhood. And so these people, were they working? Were they active? Were they doing more manual labor? Yes, probably, compared to what we're seeing with the activities that we do now, right? And, I know that we are setting kids up at a very young age with phones as a way to distract or allow parents to get things done around the house. So this is very much a systemic problem with every age range. And if it's happening early on, how can we counteract these effects? Because again, it is a challenge and a problem. And we'll dive into some of the research here in just a moment. So one thing I was going to share is I had a colleague who x-rayed a 12-year-old several months back, and the 12-year-old was showing phase 2 degeneration. Now, if most of you know, phase 1 degeneration is changes show up on x-ray, and typically that change is a curve change. Phase 2 is where we start to see disc involvement. So when you're talking about a 12-year-old with phase 2 degeneration, typically we're talking 5 to 30 years for changes to show up on x-ray. So this indicates significant stress going on a structure where this child has likely been using technology pretty frequently, consistently day to day, and using it in an inappropriate way. So that's a problem. What does that mean for, you know, this child who's 12 now? What does that mean 20, 30, 40 years from now? So let's take a look at this. This is the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, and they're really looking at what are the signs of tech neck and what are typical symptoms that this person could be experiencing when they're carrying this type of posture. Okay, so we know when it's a 60-degree angle, that's 60 pounds of pressure being placed on your spine and your neck. But typically we see people who are in this posture have neck pain, have headaches, have numbness and tingling into the fingers. And I would go one step further with, what is this doing to the brain and the spinal cord? Again, you should have that nice banana curve of your cervical spine, right? And when you have a banana curve of your cervical spine, that allows for the spinal cord to rest comfortably through that canal. But when you start to have a straightened curve, right, and even reversal of that curve, what does that do to the banana, right? It smashes, stresses the fruit. Same thing with your spinal cord. When you start to straighten that curve in the spine, that puts stress and tension on a spinal cord, that's stress and tension directly on a brain, and that's a problem. I was sharing with several people recently that, you know, it's been about a year that I was sitting in a continuing education seminar, and the presenter talked about the precursor to any disease and condition is stress to a spinal cord. And it doesn't have to be a ton of tension, just light tension on that spinal cord. It's pulling on the brainstem, pulling on the brain where we integrate most sensory information for us to better perceive and understand what's going on in our environment, right? So we're talking about a much bigger conversation outside of, you know, neck pain, headache, numbness, tingling in the fingers, which is a major problem, but it's also looking at altering input to our brain that alters how we're able to respond to our environment, okay? So we've already talked about the difference between 100 years ago and now, right, is our technology usage. And this slide talks about the average adult spending nearly 8 hours a day in media. And this is an average. So that means that there are people spending much less time. You know, there's some people who, I have neighbors across the street who don't even have cell phones. You know, they just have a home phone, and their cell phone is used for emergency situations where they turn it on at only specific time frames. So this includes people who do not even utilize a cell phone or technology, and people on the other spectrum who are maybe spending 10, 12, 14 plus hours a day. So we are in, you know, the average adult, this is back in 2017, spending around 8 hours a day of consuming media. And it really starts with right away in the morning. So again, looking at how we're consuming our media and then what's appropriate in terms of how to support our structure in that process. Here's another time component. And this is looking at millennials. And this is from the Wall Street Journal. And this was a survey done in 2014, adults aged 18 to 36. And we're talking about 18 hours of media use per day, right? We said the average American was around 8. Millennials, so the younger folks who grew up with technology, are using it significantly more. I mean, you look at some of these bigger circles of being on the internet, social networking, watching TV, playing video games, time-shifted TV, that's like a Netflix or a Hulu, something where It's not real-time TV, but something they're watching that they've recorded or can watch at any point. You know, we've got radio, we've got email, texting, news, and then, you know, at the very end, we've got some print magazines and newspapers. But when we're spending this kind of time using media, it's really important to set up appropriate tools for us to counteract these impacts that happen when we are, you know, in these postures engaged in media use. So this is an orthopedic surgeon who is out of Wake Forest Medical Center in North Carolina, Alston Stubbs. And he says, we see the spine and overall skeletal structure being critical to a patient's functionality and their satisfaction with their life and health care. He also went on to say that posture is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, right? That nobody necessarily wants to talk about in terms of how important it is to our health. Basically, he was saying that an unhealthy posture is an unhealthy or sick person. Sick posture equals sick person equals sick brain. So this is really an important conversation. It's not just about, you know, our moms telling us to sit up straight, you know, as a kid, sit up straight, sit up straight. This is a problem. And some research that I do like to share with people on a day-to-day basis is they studied folks who were around 60, 65 and older. And they found that those people who had an increased kyphosis, now an increased kyphosis is where you have an increased curve in your thoracic spine. So you're really rounded through here. So those folks who had an increased curve in the thoracic spine, if you couple that with a respiratory disease, bronchitis, asthma, COPD, pneumonia, we could even put COVID in there, flu. If you coupled this with a respiratory disease, that person was 147% more likely to die of that respiratory disease than if they were standing upright. That's a big deal, right? So if you can have healthy movement in a spine, if you can be standing more upright, then guess what? You're a healthier person overall. But posture is certainly a conversation we need to be talking about. And not only that, but media use and how we're using that and what self-care tools we have to utilize day to day to combat the stress of, you know, what's really required, because a lot of us have to be at a workstation day to day. Now, this came from the Wall Street Journal, and this is from a doctor of physical therapy, spine hospital, out of the Neurological Institute of New York, Dr. Evan Johnson. How we hold our bodies while we interact with these devices is very much under our control. Posture re-education is key to decreasing the incidence of back and shoulder pain, back, shoulder, and neck pain. Now, he's just talking about pain here, right? And it's under our control. So that's really an empowering message that we can change what's going on with our bodies structurally now. It just takes work, it takes consistency, and it takes diligence. Understanding that posture, and again, these processes of degenerative changes that happen in our structure over time, that's just what it takes. It takes time. What researchers are telling us is our spine should maintain its structural integrity for 125 years before breakdown. That's only if we're taught to take care of our spine in a healthy way, move it, make sure it's aligned properly every day from the start of life to the last day of life. And yet we had degenerative changes taking place much, much earlier on 12 years old for some people. And it gives you an idea of the cumulative stress that our systems are under and what these repetitive postures are consistently doing to stress this. So posture reeducation is key to not only reducing back, shoulder, neck pain, but also improving the quality of somebody's life, right? Again, get up to 60, 65 years old, respiratory disease, you want a system that can handle it. When you have movement forward, guess what? It decreases the amount of space that your organs, your blood, vital organs have to function. So we want to make sure that you are functioning at your best. And when you're standing upright, you can breathe easier. You guys can do this with me right now. Go ahead and round your shoulders. Take a deep breath in. Right? And now I want you to sit up straight. Open your chest up to receive. Now I want you to take a deep breath in. A lot easier, right? And so having that movement is so vital and so important for not only reducing pain, but improving function and longevity. So you are responsible and you can change what's currently going on with your structure. And this is a major problem. Again, what was your homework that I started with is just watch. Just take a look at the people walking around you. What do their postures look like? Number one, and how many of them are tuned into their technology and using it in inappropriate ways, oftentimes putting extra pounds of pressure onto that spine by this 60 degree or 45 degree or 30 degrees, which 30 pounds, 60 pounds is going to cause stress over time. So let's talk about some solutions here. If you are in the office at any frequency, you'll know that I talk about postural interruptions. They are so vital to break up our postures during the day. And the gold standard is every 15 minutes, you do a postural interruption. Here 3 minutes, breaking up every 15 minutes of device use. So again, it's not something where you need to go do 3 sets of 10 push-ups. This is something where you can stand up, do some shoulder circles, do some ranges of motion, and get back into the work that you're doing. But this needs to be an alarm that is set pretty consistently. And so you and I are 21 minutes in. So 6 minutes ago, we could have stood up and done a posture interruption. So let's just do that right now. So what I want you to do is I want you to stand. I want you to reach your hands to the ceiling. Okay. And I want you to stretch. I want you, as you are dropping back, I want you to pull these shoulder blades back. Bring these shoulder blades or these arms around, couple shoulder circles. Good. Move your head to one side, then to the other. I want you to drop your chin down, then up to the ceiling. And I want you to squeeze your glutes. 1, we're gonna do 5 of them. 2, 3, 4, last one, 5. Then we're gonna do a chair squat. We're gonna do 2 of them. There's 2, and there's our postural interruption. It took significantly less than 3 minutes. So, and guess what? You feel good. You moved your body. And in that time frame, you also improved your ability to increase your productivity. So, gold standard, every 15 minutes, I want you to do a postural interruption. Secondly, changing positions and moving around. So this is where a standing desk is great because a lot of times when we are standing, we are moving and we are engaging our body in a way that we don't necessarily get when we're sitting all of the time. So if you have props or tools like an exercise ball or a vestibular disc that you can set on top of your chair, if you can go from standing to sitting, moving around and changing your position frequently is going to be, really important and vital, so that you don't get into that one position and you stay there. Because we all do it. I do it too. I'm a chiropractor and I get into, what I'm working on, and you'll find me rounded, you'll find me focused, and I could be there for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, right? So we all do it. It's just, do we have the tools in place that an alarm goes off and gives me the indicator that, oh, I need to get up and move, right? Standing desk, an alarm goes off, after 30 minutes that, oh, I'm going to stand for the next 30 minutes. Okay. You should adjust the height of your screen so that it is at eye level. And you can see actually how the screen is tilted back. You want that screen to be 30 degrees from vertical. So again, it should be eye level. You should not be looking down at a screen. And you can use a chair with a headrest to keep your eyes level. Again, there's appropriate ways that you can be sitting. We do a whole conversation around an ergonomic workstation setup so that you can set yourself up for success if you are doing a lot of work at a workstation. But this conversation is just, let's just give you a couple tools that you can start using. Then we can dive into the best ergonomic setup for your workstation. So those are going to be good tools for you to use. Oh, and the last thing I would say, if you've never had your spine checked, get your spine checked. Okay. 8 hours of media use, up to 18, depending on where your age range is and where you fall in terms of your work activities, your lifestyle activities. And if you've got any type of forward head movement, if you're showing signs of tech neck, then guess what? There's stress to a spine. That spine's not moving appropriately. And stressed posture equals stressed body equals stressed brain. And so my challenge for you, as with everybody, is if you've never had your spine checked, get your spine checked, because then we can really evaluate the level of stress that lifestyle has done to impact your body, and we can give you tools to get back on track for healthier structure. So let's see where we are with time. Oh, we're 25 and a half minutes in, so we did great on time this evening. So again, what I'm going to go over is sick posture equals a sick body. And we have control over re-educating our posture. We can change it. It just takes work, takes consistency on a daily basis. And that's really an empowering conversation to have, is just because your body and structure are showing up this way now doesn't mean that that's what it has to be. And so going back to those tools, just those brief tools, posture interruption every 15 minutes, making sure your workstation is set up appropriately, using your tools, whether it's a disc or a ball, to change your positioning frequently, and making sure you're consistent with your chiropractic care. That is going to be really supportive 10, 20, 30 years from now when you're consistent with that, right? It's going to be amazing. So homework is check out the people around you, see how their posture is, how they're engaging their technology inappropriately or appropriately, and understand that when you're standing more upright and you have better movement in your spine, your head's where it should be, you're a healthier individual. And a healthier individual is better able to respond to stress, better able to respond to exposure to viruses and bacteria. It's a healthier immune system. So it's just good all the way around. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate your willingness to invest in your time today with diving into a conversation that I think is really vital for what we do today. So love and appreciate you, and I will see you next time.